slides. So who's up first?
Can you just hang on, son? Sorry, can you just give me a minute?
Oh, Kath, you pick someone here.
I consider myself a former young person. I am actually 43, but I'll get away with it in this room. Just one tidbit and then a question. I suspect young people aren't engaged because did you know financial stress lowers your IQ by 13 points? That is research out of Princeton from 2013 they call poverty brain. It's very hard to care about politics when you're fighting to survive.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind, please. My question to you is actually on your productivity question.
Yeah.
I think you're dreaming. And that is because 55% of global GDP, that's $58 trillion, is either moderately or heavily reliant on nature. And because of climate change, they're actually predicting massive contractions in GDP. The worst cases are 50%. That is going to hit your super and your shares. So tell me how you are going to increase productivity in that scenario. I'm really curious to know if that's being dealt with and what you're thinking about that. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's an excellent question, and I have actually given a lot of thought to the challenge posed to economic growth by the extraordinary amount of environmental degradation that we have inflicted on the planet, and not just through climate change, but including through climate change. And I do agree with you that it is a real issue. And in fact, you know, I addressed the National Press Club recently and made the observation that in that address that those people who believe that there's necessarily a contest between economic development and the environment need to explain how it is that in the past 25 years the rate of environmental degradation in Australia has accelerated, and it has, including land clearing, and at the same time our rate of productivity growth has plummeted. Right, so, and that's your point. And I can see a connection, and we could spend hours discussing the way that those points connect, but there are some very strong connections. Notwithstanding that, I do think that we do have to rebuild the environment. We do have to engage in nature repair, and that will, to some extent, relieve the constraints. But whilst we're engaged in that, we can also do a lot to lift the rate of productivity growth. The productivity growth comes from two sources. I'm speaking as an economist, right? Economists know that something called capital deepening is a big driver of productivity growth. In simple terms, that means giving a worker a tractor rather than in place of a couple of shovels, right? That's capital deepening. Obviously, the worker is going to become more productive working with a tractor rather than a shovel, right? So that one is easy enough to understand, and by the way, it's very easy to measure. The other source of productivity growth is something that economists refer to as either multi-factor productivity growth or total factor productivity growth, and we don't have a clue about it. We've got some hunches. Innovation, new processes in industrial practice and so on. New inventions, of course, can make workers much more productive. And so on, you know, but when we do the numbers and we look at productivity growth over a long period of time, let's say a 30, 40, 50-year time period, and we look at how much can be explained by capital deepening, we find, in Australia anyway, it's about half. Maybe a little bit more than a half can be explained by capital deepening, and the other bit, well, there's, you know, 1,000 possible explanations. What this means is that the rate of business investment is really, really, really important, because that's where the capital deepening comes from. And I don't know if you know this, but the rate of business investment in Australia for the past decade has been stuck at levels that we had only previously ever seen before in the depths of the 1990s recession. We've got an investment drought in Australia, and it's been going on for more than a decade. and it has to be fixed.
So address the environmental degradation
Yep,
and do the other stuff around capital deepening at the same time.
correct. Both, yeah.
Sarah?
How confident are you that we can have wages growth without inflation?
Yeah, okay, so that's a really good question, and the answer is, if the wages growth matches productivity growth, then I've got 100% confidence. And if the wages growth runs ahead of productivity growth, then I don't have any confidence. And so the reason there is that, as I said earlier, look, inflation is just prices going up, right? That's all inflation is. And as I said earlier, prices are determined by demand and supply conditions, right? Now, what productivity growth does is shift the supply curve out, okay? And what wages growth does is shift the supply curve up. And provided wages growing at the same rate as productivity growth, the supply curve doesn't shift.
So if workers are producing more, it doesn't cause inflation, but if
That's
they're
right.
getting paid more for producing the same, it does.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it.
Hi, thanks very much, Ken. My question is to do with the principal residence. It's a very delicate matter.
Oh, really? Please. We'll treat this confidential.
That's good then, thank you. It seems to me that the principal residence is a non-productivity increasing asset. You know, you build
Yeah.
once, and all the advice is to put all your money into your principal residence and
Your microphone's gone.
right. And then put all your money into the principal residence, and then that's it. So that's the loss of an asset. So I'm just wondering how other countries treat the principal residence.
Well, there's a whole range of, it's an excellent question. But the international experience in capital gains tax is mixed, and the international experience on taxation of housing is mixed. And I don't think there's any good model to point to. But it does remind me, and somebody in the break also mentioned it to me, that there is something a bit odd about having a principal residence exemption that's completely uncapped, or allowing negative gearing on properties above a particular, up to any level really. And I remember an anecdote, and I might tell Michael more about this over dinner because I can't tell the full story here. But I remember an anecdote with a colleague some years ago, and it went something like this: "Oh, I need to buy a new house." I said, "Oh, that's interesting. Where are you looking to buy?" "Oh, well, I'm looking to buy in this particular suburb." And I said, "Oh, so you're having trouble?" "Oh, no, there's a lot of good properties there to buy." It's a principal residence. A lot of good properties there to buy in the $6.5 to $7 million bracket. But I'm really looking for something in the $9.5 to $10 million bracket. Why? Because property prices were starting to take off. This was, investing in owner-occupied housing, and this was an owner-occupied house, and he had cash to spend. Fantastic investment, right? Completely tax-free. Wonderful. So he wanted to put 10 million in. Wasn't good enough to put 6 or 7 in, right? There you go. Yeah, I know.
I've got 2 points I'd like to ask you about. The first one is I think that young people are not as angry as they could be because they don't understand that 50 years ago, and I don't know what happened on the East Coast, but in Western Australia 50 years ago, the government owned a lot of the land in the northern suburbs. You would go to an auction, you were not allowed to bid at the auction if you owned other real estate. So it was set up strictly for either first home buyers or it was set up for people that had no property. And so prices were they were reasonable. So I'm sure that perhaps there are other states where it was the same thing, but in WA there was no competition when you buy land or a house. It was just genuine homeowners only.
Wow.
And because the government here recognised that they wanted everybody to have the great Australian dream of owning their own home.
Yeah.
For one thing. And that leads to part B, which is, I don't understand how you're running a business, you've got multiple properties, so you're running a business of buying multiple properties, you're renting them out, you're using two independent, if you're a couple, independent incomes to reduce your tax. But my husband and I have a small business. He's a computer programmer, he's been one forever. I used to do the bookwork, I was a bookkeeper, and at some point the government changed the rules. I used to take out a small wage because I was the bookkeeper, and at some point the government said, you can't have a wage anymore, he's the only one earning the income, he's the only one that can take out a wage. So we couldn't split income or anything.
Yeah.
However, the government says, you can split your income if
With
you want to
investment
have a
properties,
business
yeah.
buying properties.
Yeah, no, that's
I
true.
don't think that's fair.
No. Well, I'm not going to argue with you. But on the first point, I'm scratching. Well, I'm not literally scratching my head, but I haven't heard of that sort of segmentation of the market, unless possibly in the ACT in the 1970s, possibly. I think they had a ballot system then. I think only first home buyers were allowed to enter into auctions for. But yeah, that's the only other occasion that I've come across it.
A new idea. Thank
Well,
you.
there was Curtin, Hammersley, Duncraig, all of those suburbs were owned by the government, and they all had restrictions on how you could buy land.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've spoken about new taxes or improving old taxes, but how do we go about collecting the actual taxes we have in place at the moment? The tax gap, the people who avoid that. We are constantly coming into contact with people who offer you a 10% discount if you pay cash, etc., etc. I live next door to a plumber who brags about the fact that he was able to build his 2-storey house because he's in the business. So how do we solve the tax gap? And as a two-pronged one, following on from my colleague over the side there, should we, or is it time that we get rid of trusts?
Whoa! Well,
You take that.
obviously the night's getting on. I always know that it's getting fairly late in the night when somebody proposes that we get rid of trusts.
Why?
It's just the politics of it is absolutely toxic. So yeah, I'll take you through it very quickly. Like I did have a go. Not at getting rid of them, but put a proposal to the Howard government actually that, and they accepted the recommendation for a little while until they, well, on reflection, decided that it was a pretty dumb idea. But for a while they accepted the argument that there was no reason to tax trusts any differently from companies, particularly if you've got an imputation system that allows for the refund of franking credits, which would allow a trust to continue to be used for income splitting purposes. Out of that piece of work came a decision to allow excess franking credits or imputation credits to be refunded to shareholders, but the other part of the decision to tax trusts like companies never went ahead because of the politics of it. So we went backwards, not forwards. That's how politically toxic it is to think about taxing trusts like companies. Mind you, I haven't given up on it. I don't know, are we going to talk about, should we talk about ways to achieve a more neutral taxation treatment of capital income?
Let's do that, shall we?
Because here's the thing, right? So, if you think of the way that various forms of capital income, investment income are taxed, it's a whole array of differences. So, owner-occupier home, there's no tax treatment at all, really. It's basically input tax, is what you should say, I guess, and it's not subject to capital gains tax. We've spoken quite a lot about rental housing. You can go to bank accounts. Bank account, full interest assessment, right, on your bank account. And then we can go to dividends. Very different tax treatment there, but that's also capital income. And then we can go to trust distributions, which is or should be regarded as a capital income distribution as well, right? And what happens there depends upon whether it's a fixed trust or a discretionary trust and your marginal tax rate. Anyway, some other countries, Nordic countries mainly, have dealt with this by having what they call a flat rate scheduler tax system. And the way that works is, the way those tax systems work is to say, you know what, labour income and capital income are different things. And labour income is going to continue to be subject to the personal income tax system that we've spent some time talking about, but we're going to deal with capital income differently. Oh, by the way, I didn't even mention rent. Rent is obviously a form of capital income. Capital gains are a form of capital income. So, here's a proposal, right? A proposal would be, let's just put all of your capital income into a bucket and tax it at a flat rate. Not only all of your capital income into the same bucket, but the expenses as well into that same bucket and apply the same flat rate to it. And if you've got excess expenses left over, then we'll give you a credit for that at that flat rate against your other income. So it would allow some form of negative gearing, but very limited amount of negative gearing. And that you can choose what that flat rate is. You could decide, for example, it might be a 20% flat rate. So 20% flat rate of tax on interest, on dividends, which unfortunately you'd have to abolish the imputation system to do it, but anyway, you could do it, on rental income, but with only 20% of interest being deductible.
So would that move capital to the most efficient
Yeah,
places?
because it's, well, you would hope so over time, right? Because no matter where it's invested in the economy, it's going to face the same tax treatment, which is something that we do not have at the moment. When the Nordic countries first introduced this, there was a lot of poo-pooing, well, that's not going to work, like, what's that? But it's proved sustainable. And they've been able to deal with, the obvious potential source of tax mischief is people recharacterising wages as capital income. But for God's sake, we got that in spades now, right?
I'm going to ask you to make a short comment about the cash economy,
Yeah,
and then we're going to have short questions and short answers for the remaining 7 minutes.
Okay, I was trying to avoid answering that question.
Okay, we'll move on.
I'm aware of it, I understand it, and I don't have the answer.
Okay.
Hello, sir. Thank you for coming and speaking with us this evening. You talked about carve-outs for indirect taxes like GST, but there's been some discussion around the sort of winding back of the tax, the diesel excise rebate and scaling that back. So I'd just be interested in your thoughts about that.
I know what it's talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I'm wondering whether I want to answer it or not. I think it's getting increasingly difficult to justify the diesel fuel tax rebate. But what we really do need is and we did propose this in the tax review published in 2010, is that we've got to think about a different way of taxing fuels through a comprehensive road user charge, right? Now, when we proposed the comprehensive road user charge, it was on the basis that, and you can read about it in the tax review, that all existing taxes applying to motor vehicles, including motor vehicle registration fees, driver's licence fees, fuel excise, stamp duty on motor vehicle purchases and so on, all of that be scrapped, gone kaput. And that instead, motorists pay a charge, pay a fee, depending upon the weight of the vehicle, the road that it's travelling on, where it's travelling,
And its emissions?
and its emissions, and its carbon emissions, which is, the key point here, right? And that there be a direct distribution of the revenue to the government that's responsible for that piece of the road. So, if it's a B-double truck driving on a wooden bridge in a dirt road in rural WA, if you've still got wooden bridges in WA, I guess you might, then the money, the charge goes directly to the local government that's responsible for the maintenance of the wooden bridge and the gravel road, right? And whereas if it's part of the national highway system, of course, the revenue goes to the Commonwealth government. If it's part of the state highway system, the revenue goes to the state government, blah, 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 blah. And you can build in congestion charging and all sorts of things. But what you end up with is a system that applies a charge on the fossil fuel content. You can see how this deals very neatly with electric vehicles, right? Had the recommendation been, electric vehicles didn't even exist in 2010, but had Australian governments adopted this recommendation in 2010, electric vehicles would have just come in seamlessly, would have done nothing to the tax system, would have been all fine. But your diesel fuel used in stationary energy generation would pay the fossil fuel charge. That's what would happen. You don't have to pay for road user charge, obviously, but you would pay the fossil fuel.
And I know this goes back to the can you do things piecemeal or not, but in the absence of that broad and fairly radical change on a road user charge, do you think that there is any sense in reforming a diesel fuel tax credit in the meantime because of the mixed incentives it's created?
Yeah, I'm really not sure, to be honest. I am really not sure. And by the way, although that sounds radical, you know, we did something highly unusual in the tax review in 2009, before concluding the design of the comprehensive road user charge. I had it wasn't really a public session, but it was in a room like this, although it was over dinner, with the truckers. And I honestly thought, when I went into the room and there was booing and hissing and all, because they knew what I was coming to talk about, I thought that, you know, there was a fair chance I might not get out alive. And I was there on my own, like I didn't have anybody else with me. And once I'd explained it to them and was able to say to them, this turned out to be a very compelling argument, put your hand up if you have ever been frustrated by the fact that you cannot drive your B-double on a dirt road with a wooden bridge that would save you, you know, at least $1,000 in fuel. And every hand in the room went up, and I said, yeah, well, this would fix that, right? The reason you can't is because the local government is responsible for the expenditure, and they get, under present arrangements, they get no revenue. And anyway, I got a standing ovation at the end of the night.
You might get one here too.
And I thought, but also the NRMA supported it, the Queensland mob supported it, the Victorian mob supported it, and notwithstanding that, the Australian governments were too gutless to do it.
And that's the thing. We've probably got time for one more. Kath up the back there.
Hi, thank you very much to the lovely lady on the other side of the room who said young people aren't angry. I'm 24 and very angry. So we're living in a state where we pretty much need 2 full-time incomes to survive at the moment, which is hectic, and that's why I think our birth rate sucks. So how do you think young people should be more involved? Because we feel like we are making quite a bit of noise. I know there's a lot of noise on social media, but we feel like it's not being heard. And we feel like our general media is quite censored and we're not reaching where we need to reach. So how do we do that?
So I do have an answer. I do have an answer, and I mean this quite genuinely, and this is not set up. Young people have to elect people like her. Yes. That's it. Young people have to take a greater interest, like you're taking, in what's going on in their electorate, get involved in their electorate, and elect to Canberra and also to the state parliament, people like her.
Exactly, yes.
It feels very self-serving to end on that note. I would like to say I'm really, really sorry. And my advice would be come to events, come and tell me, because as you can see, it's a lot of retirees who come to my events. No, they're very, I think they're the best retirees. And a lot of the time there is this broad acceptance of the intergenerational inequity, but I really struggle to hear the voices of people in their 20s because they are understandably disengaged and disillusioned. But when I hear your stories, I can amplify them. So turn up, get angry, write to either your MP or ministers as well. Share that story, because I think community, what we need, I think we now have 2.5 years to get into a position where people across Australia are saying to both sides of politics, what are you going to do about tax reform? What are you going to do about intergenerational equity? And it's only when that broad community appetite for change exists that we will actually get competitive proposals from different parts of government. And what I can do is try and expand that space by doing things like the event that I'm going to shamelessly plug on Tuesday night, which is an online event, and we're trying to do it online to attract young people who may not come in person, about negative gearing and capital gains tax, using a technology platform, a really different way of running an event, so that we can actually expand that space and say, even if neither major party is prepared to talk about capital gains tax and negative gearing reform, we will, and I will show that it's not political poison to raise these difficult issues, and you can appeal to the best in people, not the worst, and you can appeal to people of all ages saying, is this the country we want to live in? So turn up, make a noise, contact people, don't disengage from the political process, because it ultimately means that you don't get a say in it. But thank you very much for your question. So there are, with that event on Tuesday, it's a bit of an experiment. It's an online event from 6 to 7:30 at night. It's using a new platform, which is sort of like a chatbot that you have a conversation with, but then it surfaces the consensus ideas, and then you can see what ideas are coming up and vote on them as well. So if you're willing to try something a bit different, there are QR codes on posters on the dividing door there, and then the door on the way out. If you can't work that out, speak to someone from my team with the microphones. Please come along, because I want us to be able to have those community conversations about how we can solve what seem to be intractable problems, and how we can build a bit of guts and a bit of boldness in the economic reform that we see. So thank you very much for coming along, and thank you so much to Ken for making it over to the West. Please thank him.
A quick photo down here.
Right. If everyone doesn't mind, we've got a photo with Kate and Ken and the crowd. So if you can all stand up.
Duck if you don't want to be in it.
If you don't want to be in the
Yeah.
photo.
Oh, I see. Are you in that?
We're just trying to get the crowd shot.
put it there.
It's fun.
Yeah, okay.
Crowd
Right,
shot.
we'll do that. Crowd shot, go.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No worries.
Great. Wow, what an attractive bunch.
Everyone say
Beautiful.
great.
Yeah, great.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. And thank you.
Well done.